This time on KEI Fabrication.
Well folks, today may be the last day that you see it with stock front wheels.
Hide all the women and children. Hide all the women and children. Hide all the women and children. All the grinding's done. Time to clean the garage. This is the Ford Explorer, the 2001 that I purchased. Found it on Craigslist. Well folks, I just came back from the scrapyard. So I ran up to the scrapyard. Well, we're up here at the junkyard. Well, we're back in the junkyard.
Well folks, I've finished up some of my other responsibilities and I finally got some time to play working on retrofitting some stuff on the Mazda. Today may be the last day that you see it with stock front wheels. Let's see how we make out. Alright folks, you've seen me do this many times. Today hopefully it is for the last time in the brake conversion. One of the funny things is it's the end of June. Tomorrow is June 30th. It is almost a year since I started the conversion on this truck. I've put between 9,000 and 10,000 miles on it, and it's still an ongoing project. So here we go a year later, and we're still working on it. Making improvements though, hopefully. Alright folks, let me show you how this adapter is going to work for the Crown Vic hubs. If you remember, I did a prototype 3D printed. Here's the cylindrical one, the complete one. And I did it, and I printed the 3D prototype to make sure that it matched the geometry in here pretty well. The interference I'm having is where this taper runs out, and I did not leave enough room for it to run all the way out. So I made the assumption that this taper ran down right to this inner race, and it does not. There's a step here, so I'll have to make the change to the CAD model to make that work. Everything else seems to be working really well. So the 3D prototypes fit on there, and then we have the finished part that I showed you earlier. And I just went in with the lathe and relieved that area. And so this will adapt the inner and outer race from the Mazda with this taper. So this flange right here meets up against this flange. So that's step one. That goes on there. And then what happens is when we put the spacer in the hub, so once the bushing is now installed in the hub, and you can see that it is recessed just behind it. And I think I showed you this before, but this washer pushes on the bearing. It does not push on the spacer. So the reason why I wanted to show you this is here is the end of the bushing. Here is the inner race for the outer wheel bearing on the Mazda. This washer registers on that, and it slides over it. It does not bottom out on this spacer. It bottoms out on this bearing. You can see that the spacer is a little over 1/8 of an inch below this surface that is the roller bearing, the ball bearing, and this face of this washer pushes on it. So once the assembly is together, it preloads the bearing in this hub just like it would be on the Crown Vic spindle. So we've just replicated the condition on the Crown Vic spindle here on the Mazda spindle. So as far as doing something outside of the ordinary or unsafe, if we replicate the conditions in the Crown Victoria, we should duplicate the situation here. So this bushing is, or adapter bushing, is already installed. So I'm going to put the washer on, the stock factory spindle nut for the Mazda, And then I am going to torque this up. And then we have the Crown Victoria wheel bearing on the Mazda. So that was the long lead time thing to get that prototype ironed out and then find a machine shop that was willing to do a short production run to manufacture the bushings for me. And now that we have that, the rest of the process is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to knock this back apart, blow some paint on the spindle, and then I'll show you a minor modification to the Mazda spindle to get the Ford Explorer caliper bracket to fit on there. So hopefully that was a clarification or just an education, if you will, on how to adapt from the Mazda spindle to the Crown Victoria spindle. Alright folks, you can see that I got the spindle stripped down and I fit these bushings on, and they fit within like a 32nd of an inch from bottoming out on the spindle flange here. And I put some bluing dye on there, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but way down at the end by the cone, way down here, there's a tiny line that is got a little interference. So I'm going to relieve that, and then I think that was like the big question mark. I think the rest will be good to go. Alright folks, it's all together. I've torqued this up to 135 foot-pounds and it spins as it should. I'm very happy about that. It fits as intended back there. So I'm going to take it apart one more time. I'm going to paint my spindle, and then I'm going to put it back together with the caliper and the rotor and try and get a brake line hooked to it. There we have it folks. The hub is on, the bushing works great. It's torqued up, the cotter pin is in, the dust cap is on. I've painted the spindle, and I'm going to put the rotor on now and the caliper bracket and caliper. Well folks, the assembly is put on. This is as far as I've gotten before, but the only thing I haven't done is hook up a brake line to it. So what we're going to do is try and adapt the Mazda brake line to the Ford Explorer caliper, and I'm hoping I can use the same banjo bolt. It's got the anti-rotation thing built in, so maybe it'll all work. We'll see. Well folks, hopefully that was a win. I was able to use the Mazda brake hose and the Ford Explorer banjo bolt. I hooked it up, I left the bleeder open, it's bled fluid up to the bleeder, so all I have to do is, once I do the other side, just finalize, bleed the brakes. But I hope this shows you the scale of what's happened here. I've got this 10¼ inch rotor to an 11½ inch rotor, and I went from this little caliper to the dual piston caliper, and this is the brake pad that's in there, this is the brake pad that came out. So hopefully this thing will stop, as some friends of mine say, stop on a dime and give you a nickel back. So that'll be fun. We take this thing to drag week, we'll be towing a trailer. We certainly could always use the extra brake capacity. If we play with this on a road course, we certainly want to have more brakes than the Mazda had for us. So I'm going to button up this side, and then I'm going to jump over to the other side, and I can't wait to put the wheels on this thing and set it down. So folks, I'm working on the other side. I just wanted to let you see what I was starting with in terms of spindle condition. So I'll knock off the old dust shield and wire brush everything, and then we'll go ahead and paint it. Alright folks, what I wanted to show you here is there's a minor modification. I use the Ford Explorer caliper bolts, and I have to shorten them a little over 1/4 inch, like 3/8 of an inch, because if I don't, when they are bolted to the Mazda spindle, they will stick out and actually rub on the rotor. So If you're doing this conversion on your own, make sure you shorten them up, and I'll do that for you right now. So I have a little shim here to hold it in position, so it's perpendicular to the blade. And then I'll just stick this on the belt sander that's behind the bandsaw here and give it a quick bevel on the end so the lead-in threads do their job. And then we will have the correct length caliper bolts. So in case you're wondering, we have full thread engagement in the caliper bracket, and we have full engagement of the shoulder on the Mazda spindle. So the bolt is actually being still used in its proper design method or criteria, if you will, even though it's been shortened, and its integrity has not been compromised. Alright folks, I'm going to divulge one of the only sketchy things that has to happen for this conversion. And the spacing of the Ford Explorer caliper bracket is just a touch larger than the spacing for the Mazda. So I have to go in and relieve this hole right here. There is a bevel edge here, chamfer from the factory, and really all I have to do is go in, and I'm going to use a burr tool, and at the very bottom of this hole, just relieve that maybe 30 thousandths to give me some center to center distance increase, and the same thing up top, just along this edge. I'm going to relieve it, and then the caliper bolts will fit through and engage the caliper bracket properly. So it's a tiny amount. Some of you may hammer me and say that that's unsafe. It's all part of this experimental design thing. Once I get it all ironed out and perfect, I'll probably go in and oversize these spindles and then put bushings in and TIG weld the bushings in place so we have a perfect alignment. For now, to get this whole prototype concept thing underway, get some miles on these bushing adapters and make sure they're going to withstand the abuse. Then we'll go back and do something with the caliper bracket bolts. Alright folks, so I don't know if you can tell, but there's just a tiny, I took about half of that chamfer away down the bottom and took most of the chamfer away at the top, and I've already test fit the caliper bracket. It fits on there great, and the bolts come through flush to the end of the caliper bracket, so I'm very happy with that. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the adapter and hub on, then I can put the rotor on, and then the caliper bracket, caliper, swap over the brake line, and then I think we're ready to put bleed the brakes and put some wheels and tires on it. Okay folks, the big brake conversion is done in the front. The Ford Explorer front rims are on it. I think the truck looks pretty good with the matching wheels now. I can definitely afford to lower it now. I got plenty of room in the wheel opening, and I just got a little bit of work to do to figure out the brake proportioning valve. Because of the offset of the rims, you can see that The tires are just about flush with the outside of the body, so just maybe a little too much outside that I was hoping for, but we might be able to get around that one way or another. So anyway, I'll keep you posted on the progress with how the wheel bearing adapters perform and what I need to do to get. The brakes are good, they're definitely working, but the pedal is a little soft, so I got to figure out what I need to do with that. So I'm going to mess around with the Ford Explorer master cylinder and proportioning valve and see what I need to do to get this thing performing like it has big brakes on it. The brakes definitely work good, the rears are working great, but the pedal is soft, so I just need to resolve that issue, and I think it'll be a complete success. I'm looking forward to updating you folks on how that all works out. Thanks for sticking with me on this big brake conversion. I know it's taken me a while to get it done, but you know, life gets in the way sometimes from our projects. Work interferes, and also lead times on manufactured parts and things like that. So thanks again for being patient. Hopefully it was worth the wait, and maybe you folks can do the same conversion on your Mazda B2200 as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll update you on the next episode. Hey folks, I'm happy to say that the big brake conversion is a complete success at this point. I did have to make a master cylinder change. The little Mazda master cylinder, I don't think had enough volume of fluid to push the big dual piston calipers with regard to what the master cylinder used to have to supply to that single piston caliper, the little caliper. So I did take the Ford Explorer master cylinder off of the vehicle I bought for parts, and I'm glad I did, because I definitely needed it. Now the cool thing is it's a direct bolt up to the booster. The bolt pattern is absolutely identical, and it fits inside the booster perfectly. The only thing I had to do was a small modification to make up for the push rod on the Explorer was longer than the push rod on the Mazda, so I made an adapter to go inside the master cylinder plunger, if you will, that the push rod engages with. So it's a matter of 300 thousandths that I had to make a spacer in there. So I did that and bled the brakes out. I just came back from a test drive, and I have to say the brakes have never ever been this good in the truck. So, and the other bonus thing is the line lock is installed, and you'll have to take my word for it, it does work. Very pleased. The braking system now is 100% complete. I have the big brakes on there. There's just a tremendous amount of stopping power. With the weight distribution in the truck, it is a little bit biased, so it will lock up the rear brakes first. So maybe a manual proportioning valve or something like that could be installed for a road racing application, so the rear braking could be taken out of it, so it could at least be adjusted. Sometimes you want the vehicle loose on entry, and you can gain that with a little more rear braking bias. So that's something that we can work on in the future, but for now I just wanted to make sure that I could in fact get these dual piston calipers to work with the truck, and the key to the whole puzzle was using the Ford Explorer master cylinder. I was very concerned about it because the Mazda had a 7/8 bore master cylinder, and I was worried that the pedal effort would increase dramatically with the Ford Explorer because it has a 1 1/16 diameter master cylinder bore. But I believe the volume is necessary with this master cylinder to drive those dual piston calipers, plus we have rear disc brakes on it now. So it kind of makes sense. The master cylinder matches the braking system that's on the truck. It was a good move to grab that master cylinder off of the parts vehicle, and I took the time to get, while I had the brake lines all apart, to get the line lock installed as well. Just one more thing off the checklist, and I'll get into this a little more, but I do have the drag week checklist going, and you can see that the list is kind of extensive. Some of them are expensive and a long amount of time, and some of them are relatively. Anyway, we'll go into this in more detail with another video. So again, thanks for being patient with the braking system. It is a success. I'm looking forward to putting some miles on it. I've got my 5-lug bolt pattern all the way around now, matching wheels. One thing I'm going to need some help with you folks to decide. I kind of like the center caps just being that kind of rugged look with no thing. This is the center cap that was on the Ford Explorer, and I'm not sure if I like them on the Mazda or not. You'll have to let me know what you think of that. I could always change that center logo to read Mazda, and it would be similar to, it's tough to read the Mazda logo here, but there's the original center cap that was on the Mazda wheels. I could always have a decal shop make up a Mazda logo to go on there and replace that, but you'll have to let me know. My feelings are still mixed. I don't know if I like it with the lug nuts covered or whatever, but anyway, I'm open to suggestions. Make a comment and let me know what you think of the braking system. Next time on KEI Fabrication. Next video, we hope to be working on more stuff to get it ready for drag week.